Cool. Hi everyone. In case you don't know me, I'm Akshat Saxena, a third year member of the DEPSOC. I have been a former vice president of the society in my second year. Now I'm just a senior member. Okay. So, एक second. हाँ ठीक है. So this is basically a first workshop to introduce you people to parliamentary debating. You people might have thoughts regarding what kind of atmosphere you're gonna face in this environment or in this activity, preconceived notions. I'll talk about what myths you may have and what the reality is, and basically, like, just give you an overview of how a parliamentary debate happens, what you are supposed to do, how what the process of parliamentary debating is, how it plays out, etc. Okay? So, it will be an hourish long session for all training sessions, not just this one. Expect them to be around an hour. It may go overboard because we also have to like 10 to 2 questions at the end or things like that. So if you have doubts, we'll resolve them obviously, and that will also take up some of the time. We plan sessions to keep them concise as far as possible, but I don't think we're going to have any session that's going to be less than an hour. So for today and for future days, if we're having any training session, be mentally prepared that it will be an hour or so. Uh, and just like listen carefully. Don't doze off like you might have done in online classes. Uh, Also, like, feel free to write things in chat or unmute and ask questions. I'm perfectly fine with anything. Like, interruptions are okay, I guess. But like, also, like, if I'm explaining something and I'm right in the middle of it, तब interrupt मत करना. बिल्कुल flow break भी मत करना. Like, थोड़ा सोच के interrupt करना. Okay. So these are the things that you need to keep in mind no matter what, and before you understand anything else before parliamentary debating. You all are new to this, so pay attention and learn. Why do I say you all? You might have some debate experience in the past. Some of you might have done MUNs, some of you might have done youth parliaments, some of you might have done, I don't know, inter-house school debates, district level debates, national level debates, but none of them are debating experience in the context of parliamentary debating. As long as you haven't done parliamentary debating at school level, we will not consider anything else that you have done as debating experience. Okay? Or even if you have done parliamentary debating at school, you might have been taught some things in a different way or in a wrong way, possibly. University debating is much more advanced and like good. Cool. So, I don't care. Like, these are words from which our seniors told us when we were in first year. Just passing down the words forward. They're quite blunt. They're not supposed to attack you or be rude to you. They're just supposed to be informational. We don't care if you have done 10 MUNs. We don't care if you have done 100 MUNs or youth parliaments or anything. Don't think that you have some knowledge of how this thing works and there's only some additional things that you need to learn. Um, Also, for people who haven't had any kind of public speaking experience, don't feel underconfident. I was one of you. I am faring decently in this space. At the same time, for people who have experience, you have enough people in your seniors who had experience. They can testify to the fact that that experience is not that much helpful in parliamentary debating. It's a space that is new to everyone, right? So don't assume that you know anything or things like that. Sahaj, if you want to add anything here, to experience wala banda hai.
Yes, I was somebody who had all this experience, and the wordings of Akshat is something which I heard from Pratyush, who is our super senior last year. And when I heard this, that who all have done MUNs, I was the first to raise my hand and say, "Oh, I've done like 15 MUNs or whatever," and I thought that will contribute a lot.
Hmm.
But it's a new slate. This is a new format of debating. I struggled with it in the beginning, but this is why we just want to put it forward that you have to have a clean slate here. Don't think of it in a negative way that, oh, they're undermining my experience. Of course, you have experience, great, but just think of this as a new beginning altogether, and that'll help you a lot. So yeah, just that.
Yeah, exactly what Sahaj said, right? Have a clean slate, have a fresh mind. Second, keep an open mind. The reason why we say open mind is some of you might think that debating gives an outlet to your opinions or to express your opinions that you hold passionately, which is partially true. You will obviously get chances to express your true opinions and like things you're passionate about and speak on them. But you won't always speak on things or you won't always hold stances that align with your personal opinions, right? Because whether you're in favor of a motion or against a motion is decided by a random process. It's based on chance. It's either a toss or a software that randomly assigns teams to be speaking in favor or against of the motion. So if let's say I am against capitalism, for example, like imagine that I am against capitalism. I might get in a tournament a motion and a side where I have to defend capitalism, right? So keep an open mind. If you want to do good in this space, you have to be open to different perspectives, conflicting perspectives, right? Don't have a closed mind and like a narrow vision to things or issues in general. It's helpful in winning debates, but not just winning debates, it's like helpful in life in general also. Makes you a more balanced person and like just you'll just become more considerate of other perspectives and things like that. So keep an open mind, but primarily like from a debate perspective, it's very important to keep an open mind. It's important to like understand different perspectives which are in opposition to each other, because you any day any hour have you might get to defend any of those perspectives, right? And if you say कि, अरे यार this is not something I believe in, I तो believe in the opposite of this, I have held this belief since 2 3 years, since I read that article or things like that, and I am not willing to change that, then you won't find this space very good or very welcoming. In order to have fun in this space, keep an open mind, be willing to defend or at least think critically about different sides of an issue. Third is a cliche, but it's still true. Work hard and be consistent. These are the key to your success in debating. Um, we remember like when we were in first year, like Hamara batch or even your immediate seniors batch, we used to spend 3 4 hours a day sometimes, at least in the beginning, in like doing mocks and like taking feedback from seniors as to what we could have done better, or like just listening to their advice and things like that. uh, it takes hard work into like get accustomed to this activity and get better at this activity. Consistency is also important, because if you like are active for the first week or so and then you're like uh, not active, and then if you return to this space, you'll realize that you become kind of rusty, and your growth also like takes pauses in between, like just your intellectual growth as it happens in this activity. So make sure you're consistent so that you can make the most out of this activity, right? This is slide 0. I wanted to have these ideas in your mind before you learn anything else. Cool. Now talking about basics of debating, right? What is a debate? Uh, these are general things in a debate, but somewhat like parliamentary debating also. So you get a motion. A motion is basically a topic that you have to debate on. In parliamentary debating, mostly the motions start with the words "this house." What does this house mean? In any debate, there are two teams. One team is speaking in favor of the motion, the other team is speaking against the motion. The team in favor is called government or proposition. The team speaking against is called opposition. Both teams have three speakers each in them. So total 6 debaters in a debate. These 6 debaters are referred to as this house. Like if we are debating, if we are 6 people in a room and we're debating what we as this house should do, right? So you're basically supposed to like make rational arguments, usually from a neutral perspective, and take into account all harms and benefits, and come up with reasons as to why you should be in favor of a motion or be against a motion. There are motions where you have to debate from not a neutral perspective also. We'll come into that in future workshops, but in general, this house means 6 rational people that are debating in a debate room what we should do, given that we have the ability to do something, right? So for examples of motion, there's this motion this house would ban drugs, right? So if a government team would be in favor of banning drugs, an opposition team would be against banning drugs. For the debate to happen in these kinds of debates which are basically policy debates where the motion usually starts with this house would. Uh, you're supposed to assume that the government team has the resources and the ability to ban drugs, right? Because if you get into the debate of, oh, government team can't ban drugs because the policy won't pass in the parliament or anything, then there's no point in debating, because then you'll be debating whether something can happen or not, instead of debating if this thing happens, is it good for the world or bad for the world? That's the basic crux of any debate. Don't debate whether something can happen or can't happen. Debate whether the thing that we're talking about, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing, right? We'll get into motion types. Different types of motions exist. We'll have them in a separate workshop in the future. But for now, I think this should be enough. The second motion, this house believes that long distance relationships do more harm than good to people who enter into them. This is also like an example of a motion. So government would also government would defend that yes, if you are in a long distance relationship, you're likely to be more harmed than like get some benefits, like your life in general would not be good. Opposition would say that long distance relationships still do more good than harm, and even if harms exist, the good is better and things like that, right? So that's basically understanding motions and things like that. Third thing, motions are equally contested, right? So motion making is a process which takes a lot of time, a lot of thought. There are people who research about topics and think about topics a lot and what can be argued from both sides, and then they set a motion that you get in a debate, right? So there's a lot of thought that has been gone presumably in every motion or almost all motions, which means that you can't say in a debate that अरे ये मोशन तो गव हैवी था, कि यार इसका तो गव केस बहुत अच्छा था बट इस पे ऑप पे आर्ग्यूमेंट्स नहीं थी. At least in your initial phase, you not being able to run arguments on a particular side has less to do with the motions being unbalanced, but more to do with a lack of exposure to diverse ideas. Like it happens with every debater in their initial phase. You're not obviously gonna get everything right, or every argument is not gonna come to your mind. But you don't have to believe that the motion is unbalanced or things like that. The motion is balanced. There exist arguments on both sides, government and opposition. You just have to think logically and like try to come up with those arguments and defend the stance that you're supposed to defend, right? So you can't say that अरे ये motion तो मतलब op is strong in this motion, so I'm likely to lose, or then you get nervous and things like that. You're not supposed to do that. Every motion has a gov case and an op case, like arguments on both sides. You just have to figure them out, right? Fourth thing, no right and wrong. So debate topics are controversial issues that in most cases affect the real world as well. These are things where it's not settled as to what is objectively right or wrong, right? People in the real world are also discussing these things. Policymakers or like anyone in general, people are usually discussing these things in the real world too. And there are differing opinions that continuously come up from both sides, right? In favor of a topic and against a topic. So you can't be like there is like a particular stance is absolutely wrong or absolutely right, and like there's no objective right or wrong in debate motions. You might have your subjective beliefs. You are allowed to subjectively believe that this particular stance is the best stance, or this particular stance is immoral or anything like that. But in debates, while you're debating, there is no objective right or wrong. You have to, but because if there was, then there would only be one side of arguments, right? If the motion was this house would ban drugs, and you believe that banning drugs is the objectively right thing, then this would not have been a motion in a debate, because अगर होता तो opposition क्या arguments run करता, then there is no point of debating, right? So no motion, in no motion there exists this concept of absolute or objective right and wrong. There are sufficient good logical reasons to support both stances of any motion. You just have to figure them out. Cool. Hoping this is clear. Moving on. How does a debate progress? So, what usually happens is okay, so for government and opposition, we shorten the words and we use the words gov and op. So gov means side government, which is in favor of the motion. Op means side opposition, which is against the motion. So from now on, we'll use gov op. Okay? So initially, you get the sides. Like I said, a random software allocates your team a side. It can either be gov, it can either be op. uh, don't think that someone who is organizing the tournament is कोई साजिश रच रहा है तुम्हारे खिलाफ कि गव दे रहे हैं मुश्किल रखने के लिए या ऑफ दे रहे हैं, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. इट्स अ कम्प्लीटली रैंडमाइज्ड प्रोसेस, यू लाइकली टू गेट एनीथिंग. ठीक है, सो डोंट थिंक लाइक दैट. It's either a software or a toss. It can happen either way. These days it's mostly the software. ठीक है, so you'll get a side. Suppose you get side government. ठीक है, after a 5 minutes or so, there will be motion announcement. You will probably be in an auditorium. For example, हम हिंदू कॉलेज जा रहे हैं. ठीक है, हम उनके ऑडिटोरियम में बैठे हैं, वेटिंग फॉर मोशन अनाउंसमेंट्स. ठीक है, ऑन द ऑडिटोरियम, इन द ऑडिटोरियम, वो स्क्रीन जो है वहाँ पे दे विल हैव motion announcements. They'll release three motions. ठीक है, and teams have to then decide which motion they debate in. So at any point in time in a tournament, there are multiple rooms जिसमें multiple debates हो रही हैं. So if there are 10 rooms, then 10 debates are happening at the same time, which means 20 teams are there, right? In every room, there is one side government, one side opposition. They are debating. अभी एक room के बारे में सोचो. So suppose you are in SBS, you get side government. There is a team in opposition that is from some other college. ठीक है, कोई भी college assume कर लो. What will happen after motion announcements is that you'll get 5 minutes, you and that other team, to rank these motions. Ranking will again explain later. It's a simple process, but it somewhat gets quite confusing to new people, so we'll explain later. But assume करो कि सपोज साइड गवर्नमेंट पे है हिमानी, साइड ऑपोजिशन पे है गुरमीत. ठीक है, अज्यूमिंग देर आर थ्री मोशंस, फर्स्ट मोशन, सेकंड मोशन, थर्ड मोशन. हिमानी सेज दैट आई डोंट वांट टू डू मोशन 1. Gurmeet says, I don't want to do motion 3. So you both cancel out one motion. The motion that remains is motion 2. So you'll debate the second motion in your room. Then you'll get 25 minutes of time to prepare your arguments or notes with your team and like discuss these things, and like then the debate starts, right? So 5 minutes for ranking, and then you get prep time of 25 minutes, in which you basically, for the first 5 minutes or so, you think individually, like you're three people, right? So usually it's recommended that you don't start speaking as soon as the prep starts. uh, for the first 5 minutes or so, at least try to think individually in your head, like what would you run, what is the stance that this motion demands you to defend, and like what basically do I have to defend in this motion, right? No, there will not be access to internet while preparing. I'll come to that, right? So in the prep time, there you cannot refer to internet. You cannot WhatsApp your seniors or ask them ki, uh, like take help from your seniors or have them on a call or anything. All you have is you and your two other teammates and your brains to think that what arguments are reasonable and what arguments are good to support this motion or oppose this motion. How do I frame these arguments? How do I explain these arguments? दूसरी साइड क्या बोल सकती है, उसके रिस्पॉन्स में what should we be prepared to say and things like that. All you have is you and your teammates, and you have to like think logically and critically without any outside source and come up with arguments through your brain. ठीक है. uh, After that, what happens is the debate starts. You will have usually three judges judging a particular debate. uh, you'll have six speeches, so you alternate between gov and op. So gov ka first speaker starts the debate, gives a 7 minute speech. Then op ka first speaker comes and gives a 7 minute speech. ऐसे alternate करते करते six speeches, and then लास्ट में दो speeches from first from opposition and second from reply as a summary of the debate and as to why we should win. So six speeches of argumentation and rebuttals and everything, two speeches as a summary and things like that. I'll get into speaker roles later. I have a separate slide for that. After the debate ends, all the speeches are over. The judges take around 7 minutes to think of the decision and think why they are giving the debate or making a side win. And after 7 minutes, what happens is every judge starts telling you which side won according to them, and then they justify their verdict in 7 minutes. So, suppose Gov made argument X, Y made argument Y. I, as the judge, think that argument X was stronger than argument Y and beat argument Y because of reason A, reason B, reason C. So the judge will justify their verdict. You won't have arbitrary decisions based on like arbitrary factors like vocabulary or कौन कैसी अच्छी English बोल रहा है और कोई fumble तो नहीं हुआ and things like that. These are not parameters that we consider at parliamentary debating. All we judge is the content that you say, or most that we judge is the content that you say and the point that you're making or the argument that you're making. If you're making logical arguments, you're more likely than not to win debates. Okay? So this is how a debate progresses. Moving on. Acha, also before that, for prep time, the reason why we say you have to have a lot of hard work and consistency and open mind is because अभी आप में से किसी ने पूछा दैट इंटरनेट अलाउड है क्या, हमने कहा नहीं है, हमने कहा सीनियर्स भी अलाउड नहीं है, ऑल यू हैव इज योर ब्रेन. At that point, if all the research and all the preparation for a debate that has to be done is to be done through your brain needs to have content, है ना. अगर brain में ज़्यादा content नहीं है, like if you don't read as much or you don't watch workshops or videos as much, so you only have a limited set of beliefs and a limited set of ideas that you can analyze or explain. But beyond that, like if there's some new concept that you're supposed to defend, तुम्हारा केस प्रेप खाली हो सकता है ना. विच इज वाई वी से दैट यू हैव टू keep reading the news and like expose yourself to topics which are out of your intellectual comfort zone as well, right? Suppose if I am a person who is somewhat into like philosophy or things like that, I'm very weak at pop culture. ठीक है, pop culture पे भी emotions आते हैं, movies and उन सब से related. अच्छा, I'm just having call, just give me a sec. हाँ जी, sorry for that interruption. Explain. Hmm. I am a person who is comfortable in understanding concepts of philosophy or international relations like UN or the Iraq war or things like that. I'm not comfortable with when it comes to motions about pop culture or sometimes sports, for example. ठीक है, तुम लोग फुटबॉल पे बॉन्ड कर रहे थे, देर आर मोशंस अबाउट फुटबॉल बहुत सारे, हमको बहुत तंग करते हैं. वी स्टिल नॉट यूज टू फुटबॉल मोशंस, बट होना है. लाइक दिस शोज दैट इवन वी लाइक हम थर्ड ईयर में आके भी और सेकेंड ईयर में आके भी देर स्टिल अ लॉन्ग रोड एंड देर स्टिल थिंग्स टू लर्न. वी आर नॉट ऑल्सो परफेक्ट, but जो भी, we are sufficient enough to give you an introductory workshop. So the reason why we say that you need to read a lot and keep an open mind is yup, is because all you have is your brain, and अगर आपके ब्रेन में कंटेंट नहीं है तो आपके पास कम आर्ग्यूमेंट्स आएंगी. द मोर यू एक्सपोज योरसेल्फ टू डाइवर्स फील्ड्स ऑफ थिंग्स एंड diverse fields and diverse ideas which you normally don't agree with or normally don't read about and things like that, the more prepared you will be for any motion. So I like to say this sentence often: the prep in parliamentary debating is not the prep that you have in those 25 minutes. Your prep is the habits that you develop in your daily life of reading opinion articles every day, of watching videos to learn new concepts and to understand how, for example, the 2008 financial crisis happened, or what were the impacts of globalization, or things like that, right? So your prep is part of your daily life. If that is going well, these 25 मिनट will also go well. ठीक है? Moving on. अच्छा, एक second. हाँ oh sorry भूल गया. So your speech, like at least the first six speeches are 7 minutes. What happens is एकदम 7 minutes पे कभी कभी ऐसा होता है कि the speaker who is speaking, they're most likely completing their last sentence or so. So to complete your last sentence, they give you 15 second grace period कि चलो 6:58 या 6:59 time mark pe you were completing a sentence, have 15 seconds to sum that sentence up and end that sentence, and things like that. Don't exceed the 7:15 mark. Some people take 15-20 seconds over and above the 7:15 mark, us included sometimes, but in physical debating that won't be possible. They'll start tapping the tables ऐसे ऐसे करके तुम्हारा बेइज्जती हो जाएगा. So just stop before 7:15. ठीक है? So that's basically it. Cool. Now coming to speaker roles. These are what the speaker roles are and what the sequence of speeches looks like. ठीक है? The first speaker on government is Prime Minister. The second speaker is Deputy Prime Minister. Third speaker is Government Whip. And then one of the first two speakers gives the government reply speech on Gov. So reply speech cannot be given by whip speakers because consecutive हो जाएगा. Consecutive speech is not allowed in debates. So either of the first two speakers give speeches. Similarly for opposition. So the sequence is Prime Minister gives the first speech of the debate, then from the other side leader of opposition, then Deputy Prime Minister from Gov, then Deputy Leader of Opposition from Op, then Government Whip, then Opposition Whip. यहाँ पे alternate करना थोड़ा change हो जाता है. Opposition whip के बाद opposition reply gives their reply speech, then government reply gives their reply speech. 4 minutes 15 seconds. Yep, we'll send the presentation on the group, no worries. Cool. So just a note here, um, the words government and the words opposition don't represent the actual government or the actual opposition. If you are the government, it solely means that you are supposed to bring arguments in favor of the motion. अगर मैं अगर आप opposition हो, ये मत सोचो कि government means the current BJP government led by Modi and then start bashing that government in your LO speech. That is not how it works. It's nomenclature. These are speaker roles. So the third speakers on either side are called whip speakers. I'll get into that also just in a minute. But first teams ka nomenclature. It doesn't have to do with anything. It just represents the side or the stance that you have to defend. Okay? If you are team government, you're supposed to bring arguments in favor of the motion. If opposition, bring arguments against the motion. Don't think ki arey, government means government of India or government of US or the UN or anything, unless the motion specifies it to be, which some motions will. But if they don't, you are not an actual government, you're just debaters who have, in case of policy motions, you have some resources or ability to pass a policy overall, like globally and not just in India. Or if it's not a policy motion, like just a long distance relationships wala, you're just debaters debating harms and benefits of long distance relationships. Okay, this for teams. So just think for or against. Don't go by the nomenclature, don't take it too seriously. It has to do with how the format originated, what parliaments it was inspired from. उस पे हम आगे कभी chat कर सकते हैं, but अभी काम का नहीं है. For now it's just favor and against. Similarly for speaker roles, अगर मैं प्राइम मिनिस्टर हूँ, दैट डजंट मीन दैट मैं टीम का बेस्ट स्पीकर हूँ या मैं टीम का कैप्टन हूँ या मैं सबसे धुरंधर इंसान हूँ. ठीक है? डजंट नथिंग ऑफ दोस सॉर्ट्स. These are also just positions in your team. The prime minister represents only the speaker that speaks first in the team. DPM represents the speaker that goes second. GovWhip represents the speaker that goes third. Nothing beyond that. ठीक है? These are again positions in some actual parliament जिसकी वजह से ये नाम पढ़े in speaker roles के, but if you are the prime minister, you don't have to assume yourself to be Modi ji or anything. If you are the leader of opposition, you don't have to assume yourself to be a leader of Congress or something. You are just debaters, normal debaters debating a topic. If you're prime minister, it only represents that तुम्हारी टीम के पास एक केस है. You're the first speaker that's gonna go inside government and introduce that case and things like that. Similarly for opposition, ठीक है? So for all these things, teams and speakers don't care too much about the nomenclature. Just simplify it to be for or against, or speaker positions like first, second, third, ऐसे करके. So don't take them seriously, and this is the sequence. For short forms, you will get the hang of these short forms in like very soon. अभी बहुत बड़ा बड़ा लग रहा होगा, and you might be stressing whether you'll be able to remember it or not, but हो जाएगा, टेंशन की बात नहीं है. Cool. Another slide on speaker roles. एक second. हाँ जी, Manit, you have a question?
Yes. So basically, I wanted to ask Key, what is the process for cross questioning? Like, is it in the speech itself, or is there a separate time for that?
It is in the speech itself. We'll get into that in the next slide, I think.
Okay. And another question being, can we talk amongst our team during the debate? Like, if I'm the prime minister, can I give points to government with?
मतलब?
Like, if I'm the first speaker
हम्म.
and the second speech चल रही है, and I
हाँ.
get a point from that, so can I communicate that to the third speaker?
हाँ जी, हाँ जी. You
Okay.
can talk among your teammates during the debate. Just make sure that you're not talking too loudly to the point that other team can't hear or the judges are feeling disturbed and थोड़ा distraction हो रहा है. धीरे धीरे whisper कर सकते हो, but you can talk.
Cool.
So भैया. Cool. So I'll get into interjections and things like that in the next slide. They are also a part of parliamentary debating, but first completing speaker rules. ठीक है. So every speaker position has a certain role to do in a parliamentary debate. As government or as opposition, you have prepared a case, you have thought of ideas, you have thought of what analysis you can give to prove those ideas, and you have thought of rebuttals, or in the middle of the speech, you'll think of rebuttals. कि अच्छा LO ये कह रहा है, as DPM I have to think this, that, and to rebut this person, or to give reasons why what the LO is saying is not true or doesn't make sense or anything of that sort. ठीक है? So speaker roles represent what each speaker is supposed to do. So as first speaker from both sides, first let's discuss PM. PM or Prime Minister is supposed to introduce the government case. So if the motion is this house would ban drugs, as the PM, I'm supposed to give some characterization. Characterization means painting a picture of the world or the status quo. Status quo means the present state of affairs or the current world that we live in. Okay. As PM, my job is to tell what the status quo looks like or the current world looks like. What problem do we think exists in the status quo? Then specify our policy that this is how we are going to ban drugs, and then bring 2 3 arguments as to why banning drugs would lead to solving these problems that you have identified in the status quo. Okay. As gov, you're supposed to give that basic characterization. Characterization just means like explaining how things are and things like that. It's just explaining the situations around the issues. Okay. So you're supposed to give characterization, you're supposed to give your arguments in favor of a motion. Obviously, because first speaker can only do so much in a debate, it's possible that first speaker won't be able to analyze the argument to the full extent or explain extremely in detail. They'll probably just like give the argument a heading, and I'll speak 1 minute or 2 minutes about that argument, and the same thing with the next argument. Okay. So it's possible that there are explanation parts of explanations that are left in PM. That's the job of the DPM to cover. पीएम के बाद एलओ आता है. एलओ बिकॉज पीएम स्पीच ऑलरेडी हो रखी है, सो दे हैव सम कंटेंट फ्रॉम गवर्नमेंट. सो एलओ का जॉब इज टू रिबट गवर्नमेंट का आर्ग्यूमेंट्स दैट हैव कम अप टिल पीएम एंड देन इंट्रोड्यूस देयर ओन केस जस्ट लाइक द पीएम डिड. ठीक है. देन कम्स डीपीएम. डीपीएम के पास एलओ का केस है, लाइक ऑप केस टिल द एलओ. DPM has to rebut LO's arguments or like ops arguments in general जो भी अभी तक आई हैं, and then develop or evolve their own team's case. What does this mean? Developing or evolving your own case means um, like in any debate, there are going to be arguments. You both will rebut each other's arguments. Now, obviously, if some other team rebuts your argument, that reduces the persuasiveness of your argument, right? So, in developing or in evolving your own case, you also have to explain further as to like why the rebuttals that other team has given to us are not beating my arguments. So redevelop your arguments or defend your arguments more as to why responses to your arguments are not strong. You also develop your arguments in terms of like giving more analysis or more explanation as to why your argument that PM said is true, and you also give responses to responses. This happens more in later speeches like DPM, DLO, GovWeb, OpWeb. So suppose LO ने DPM को कुछ response, LO ने PM को कुछ rebuttal दिया that PM said this doesn't make sense because of XYZ reason. DPM rebuts LO का rebuttal by saying that this rebuttal is not true because of XYZ reason. So now it's the job of DLO to make sure that वो जो रिबटल अभी DPM ने बीट किया है वो रिबटल को वापस स्ट्रॉन्ग बनाना है so that your rebuttal also stands. It's not just about arguments, it's also about rebuttals. So this is what we mean by developing or evolving your own case. So making sure your arguments stand and theirs don't, making sure your rebuttals stand and theirs don't, for like through uh, different means, right? Then we come to whip speeches. Whip speeches are not allowed to bring in new arguments, right? So you might have in any case prep. So when case prep basically means like you're preparing a case for a particular side of the motion. If the motion is this house would ban alcohol and I am side government, case gov case means a set of arguments that I have made in favor of this motion. That's what the gov case means. ठीक है? Similarly op case. So जो भी आपके arguments हैं, substantial arguments in your case, they are only allowed in PM, LO, DPM, DLO. DLO तक you're allowed to bring in new arguments. Beyond DLO, you're not supposed to bring in new arguments. So the reason for this is that after whip speeches, there is not really much time left for the other teams to engage. So if you bring a new, if you save your, if you're like having a strategy कि अरे मैं PM DPM में तो बेकार सा केस रन कर देता हूँ, मैं गव में अपनी सबसे स्ट्रॉन्ग आर्ग्यूमेंट लाऊंगा सो दैट ऑप के पास ज़्यादा टाइम ना बचे बोलने का, एंड therefore I'll win the debate. So this is a strategy that teams could use if whips were also allowed to have new arguments. So this is unfair advantage and like just gatekeeping arguments and like pushing them down and like last moment pe dena so that rebuttal na aa paye. That's just debating in bad taste because you're stopping or preventing engagement from happening, engagement of different ideas from happening, which is why new arguments in whip speeches are not allowed. जो भी न्यू आर्ग्यूमेंट है PM से DLO तक लानी है, उसके बाद नहीं लानी. What are then whips supposed to do? Till DLO, substantial amount of argumentation has happened, substantial amount of rebuttals and rebuttals to rebuttals have happened. What whips are supposed to do is pehle to give additional rebuttals if they have any to the other side's case for like 1, 2 or 3 minutes, and then defend their own arguments and summarize the debate and weigh the debate. What do I mean by summarize? Summarize doesn't mean कि PM ने ये बोला, LO ने ये बोला, DPM ने ये बोला, DLO ने ये बोला, because that doesn't make sense. Judges are making notes. Judges already know आप लोगों ने क्या बोला है ना. Summarizing and weighing basically means Gov said this, Op said this. Let's assume Gov proved argument X, Op proved argument Y. We'll tell you even if both are proven, why should you care about argument X more than argument Y? If as a whip I'm able to do that, that means that I've done my speaker role well, because even if op का argument proven है, I've weighed my argument X over op का argument Y. So this is basically what weighing means. There are different ways in which you can weigh your arguments against your opponents. We'll get into that again in future training sessions. There's a lot to unpack, but this is basically what weighing means. So you can rebut the other side's argument, say that they are not true, or they are, even if they are true, they are not important, or you can say that your argument is more important, so theirs automatically is not that important, and therefore we should win the debate and things like that. So this is what the whips are supposed to do. After the opposition whip speech ends, यहाँ पे 6 speeches हो चुके हैं, ठीक है? After that you get 4 minutes of reply speeches. Opposition reply comes and then gov reply comes. What are reply speeches? Reply speeches are biased adjudication. Adjudication simply means judging. मैं यहाँ पे chat में लिख रहा हूँ because it's probably a new word and people might not know it. Adjudication means judging, ठीक है? Or judgment. So what opposition reply is supposed to do is give a biased judgment of the debate. Opposition reply, so whip speeches are not allowed to bring in new arguments. Op reply can't even bring new arguments and new rebuttals. Rebuttals भी नहीं ला सकता. Whip can at least bring rebuttal. Replies can not even bring rebuttals. All that replies are supposed to do is tell the judges कि भाई देखो ये हुआ डिबेट में, गव ने ये बोला, वाई ने ऑप ने ये बोला, this is why we are, these are the reasons why we are winning the debate, reason A, reason B, etc, etc. So as reply speakers, all you're supposed to do is give a biased judgment in favor of your side. So it's similar to how a judge would give the team's feedback. जैसे मैंने बोला कि डिबेट के बाद judges explain their feedback and explain their verdict or justify their verdict in 7 minutes, right? You're supposed to do that in a reply speech, but in a biased manner, which favors your side, because obviously judges are unbiased, but you have to support your side, right? So as op reply, I will say these are the reasons why you should give the win to opposition. As gov reply, I'll say this is what happened in the debate, this is why gov should win this debate and things like that. So those are speaker roles. ठीक है, till now any questions? I'll just take a break, इसके बाद we'll discuss interjections and all. You can unmute, you can type in chat, however comfortable.
What if our replies are very rhetorical? Like in the conventional debates in school, like we have always practiced rhetorics. So are the like what's the scene of rhetorics there?
Rhetorics are not that useful. I won't completely rule them out of parliamentary debating. Sometimes the power of your words does make a point more convincing. I'll answer the question in the chat after I answer the question asked by Savya. Savya, is that how I pronounce your name? Sorry if I fucked it up.
Yes, you have pronounced correctly.
Okay. Thank you. Cool. So I wouldn't completely rule rhetorics out, but if by rhetorics we mean like starting your speech by saying something like Mahatma Gandhi once said कि ये वो and things like that, those kinds of rhetorics are things that you have to leave at school level. Those will not work here. ठीक है? By rhetorics, if I'm so there a large portion of rhetorics that happens at school level is not applicable in parliamentary debate.
Okay.
The kind of rhetorics that do apply are things which are still somewhat logical, right? Or do prove some point. So if I'm defending a right to privacy in a debate, right? So I can probably give an analogy or as to why, how is this right being violated by the other side, or like tell why this right to privacy is so important, and without this there is no meaning of life or there is no value to life because such a fundamental right of your that you're supposed to have is being violated. This kind of rhetoric, like I'm not sure if you can count that as rhetoric. Partly it's rhetoric, partly it's analysis, which is logical analysis. So these kinds of rhetorics are allowed and like are credited in parliamentary debating, but for the most part rhetorics as existing in school level debates or things like that majorly don't apply in parliamentary debating. You're supposed to bring logical reasons as to why you should support or oppose things. What would be the possible implications of a policy? Uh, who would they benefit? Who would they harm? Why should you care about the benefit or the harm and things like that? These are logical reasons which can be done even without rhetorics, and these can win your debates. Can statistics be used? I'll come to that at a later slide. But in most cases, no. The reason is that statistics, in and of themselves, are quite uh, not exactly meaningful. They can be misleading, but the main reason is that in parliamentary debating, we value your logic or the logical steps or like explanations of an argument more than the facts that you can remember or the statistics that you can remember, like unemployment rate or mortality rate or things like that. Those facts, in and of themselves, don't mean much. What is valued more is logical reasons as to why something is good or why something is bad. How will it affect people and things like that. So, addressing questions in chat now. How are these roles set? Um, Kritika, if you're asking कि ये रोल हम किसको देते हैं and on what basis it's decided, just confirm if I understood the question right.
Yeah, yeah, it is the same interpretation.
Okay, cool. So it's set by initially it's like random. So for your first mock or your first couple of mock debates, we'll send you in random positions. Like someone can go PM, like Savya can go PM, Gurmeet can go DPM, Kritika can go GovWeb. Okay, so anything can happen. It's over time you start to find what role you're good at. Uh, I'll answer this question later. Firstly, about the roles. So initially, you get random roles because you don't know what role you're good at, right? You're new to the activity. As and when you do a few mocks, like 10 mocks or something, or 12, 20 mocks, you find yourself to be comfortable in a particular role. You find teammates that are comfortable in other roles so that you can form teams with them and things like that. And that's how roles are usually set. But my advice on roles would be to not be too rigid. Some people think that अरे I do whip best, सारा कुछ हो जाए, I can rebut the entire side's case at the end and मैं धमाका करके आ जाऊंगा. That's not how it works. आप कर दोगे धमाका, but for the like for the initial phase, keep an open mind, try out all roles sufficiently, then think what role suits you best. We will also be evaluating you and thinking from our perspective what role you are doing good. We'll try to place you in that role or like develop you in that role and things like that. Okay? So for the initial phase, make sure you have an open mind and you try all roles and things like that. Also, this example was not to say कि whip is inherently a better role. Same thing can be made by PM. कुछ लोगों को लगता है कि मैं तो first अच्छा करता हूँ, आगे मैं rebuttal नहीं कर सकता or things like that. That's not true. You've not done this activity अभी तक, so don't make assumptions about yourself. There's a lot that you can do that you don't know. So just be on the quest for that. Next question: we have to be aggressive or we have to be calm during debate? Gaurav, अच्छा ठीक है. Gaurav has raised hand. I'll just listen Gaurav's question
Yes,
first. Then,
I have two basic questions actually. First one
Hanji.
is that you spoke about the 7 minutes long speech.
Hmm.
If for example, someone finishes his speech in less than 7 minutes, is that acceptable? Because he may not gather that much of points to speak for 7 minutes continuously. And the other question is that if we collect points after hearing someone else speaks, like I'm the government, I'm from the government one, and I hear the opposition speech, then I gather some points and I know, can I note it down and then say by looking at it after when my turn comes on.
Okay. So, just a note before I answer your questions. You used can a speaker end his speech. It's important to use can a speaker end their speech, as Tanvi mentioned initially. Don't take this as an attack. We know it's difficult to adapt to, but just keep these things in mind. Okay? Just you'll get used to it. Don't worry. Just practice
Yeah,
it daily.
yeah,
You'll get
I
used to it.
totally agree. I totally agree.
Yep, yep. So answering your question now. So first question, if you complete your speech before 7 minutes, would you get less points? Theoretically, you are not supposed to, because judges are not supposed to judge you by how long you can speak. Even if you make a good argument and only spend 5 minutes in your speech, theoretically you are likely to get good marks. I, as a judge, have given good marks to people who have ended their speech at 5 minutes but have made good arguments. But what happens is usually, and I'm not taking this as an absolute scenario, मैं ऐसा नहीं कह रहा हूँ हर बार ही होता है, but usually more time in a speech means more opportunity to prove your points or to provide more explanations or detailed argumentation or rebuttals and things like that, which means that if someone can if someone ends their speech at 4 minutes, it's likely that उन्होंने इतना argumentation या इतना responses नहीं किया है जितना 7 minutes में हो सकता था. So it depends on how much you've argued and what all you've argued, what the impacts of your arguments and rebuttals are. अगर आप theoretically speaking 1 minute में भी बहुत बढ़िया से argument दे सकते हो which completely crushes the other side, I will give you good marks, or any judge should give you good marks. ठीक है. Practically speaking, it's इसका likelihood और chances थोड़े कम होते हैं, which is why generally it's advised that you use the whole 7 minutes because you're being given 7 minutes. ठीक है. फिर दूसरी साइड आगे बोलने लगेगी, बक बक करने लगेगी. So if you're giving the opportunity, why not use it to the maximum extent, right? But sure, initially you might face trouble completing the 7 minutes duration. It's not a problem. It only, like, you're only scored based on your content and what you say, regardless of how long your speech lasts and things like that. For your second question, you can note things in the between of the debate, and so before the debate starts you get sheets. You can bring your own sheets to tournaments, or like the tournament can provide you their sheets. uh, you'll make your case on those sheets, prepare your speech. When the debate starts, you'll also note down the other side's points on those sheets and probably write your rebuttals so that you can state them in your speech. So yeah, you can make notes. चैट के क्वेश्चंस. ठीक है, अभी ये एक दो क्वेश्चंस बचे हैं चैट में. I'll answer these and then अभी क्वेश्चंस और मत डालना because I have some of the workshop left. So we'll complete that and then we'll get to questions. We have to be aggressive or we have to be calm during debating. So by aggressive, you can't be aggressive in the sense that it makes the other team feel attacked or unsafe. If I'm speaking too loudly, or if I'm making very like dismissive remarks to the other team or dissing the other team, if that is the definition of aggressive, then no, you're not supposed to be aggressive in debates, because parliamentary debating is not about whether you can show that you're winning through, like, I don't know, cool phrases or something. It's about logic, it's about the ideas that you're discussing. Don't attack the debater on the other side, attack the case that they bring forward. Okay? If they bring forward an argument, think about that argument. Think what are the loopholes in that argument? How can I respond to this argument? What are the ways in which this argument doesn't make sense? Don't attack the debater and call them stupid or something, and like or speaks loudly so as to like seem aggressive and seem like you're winning the debate. Those things don't work. Even if they do work, they ideally shouldn't work in parliamentary debating. Our aim is to be as close to the ideal as possible, even if we can't achieve it completely. So this would be my answer. In terms of aggressive in the intellectual sense, uh, like, you can be aggressive in your thinking, obviously, like aggressively attacking the other side's arguments and things like that. But I think that's not what you meant to ask. Your question, I think, was more related to manner, as to how you present yourself, your body language, your voice level, etc. Uh, by calm, I don't mean you to be monotonous and bilkul dheere bolo. I'm sorry if I come off as that way sometimes. I'll try to work on that, but you can be calm. You can be a little like raised level of voice also. You should not be loud to the extent that it causes other people discomfort. So I've been in debates where the other team is speaking so loudly that I'm not able to focus on their arguments as a judge. So if you speak too loudly or you're too aggressive, it gets distracting both for the other team and for the judge as well. You don't want that to happen. You want your points to be put across in the most efficient way possible. You don't want कि तुम्हारी voice इतनी ज़्यादा loud हो जाए कि judge का focus हट जाए and they are not able to note down an important argument that you were saying, right? So you don't have to be loud or aggressive. You can have a raised voice, like there's a voice in conversations. For example, अभी जिस voice में मैं बोल रहा हूँ, this is my conversation voice. My debate voice might be a little raised from this level. That's fine. I don't have to be loud. Or I can debate in my conversation voice as well. That's also fine. एक और कॉल आ रही है, एक सेकंड रुकना. हाँ जी, I hope that doubt was clear. Aggressive और calm वाला. So I won't claim, but usually सब लोग कहते हैं that I am a very calm speaker. So you can see Vrinda and Tanvi nodding. So it depends. Like everyone has their different style. No style is right or wrong. The only definition of wrong or unstrategic. So wrong is like if it hurts the other people, right? Debating anyway is a very competitive sport. You don't want to make it more toxic by hurting other people, right? You want to be as wholesome as possible and have a safe space for conversations and for ideas to flow and things like that. So my advice would be to not be aggressive in that sense. The other wrong parameter, the other parameter which determines whether you being aggressive is wrong or not is basically whether you are able to convey your ideas. Your style should add to the persuasiveness of your arguments. You can use your style, you can use pauses. अगर मैं किसी important point पे धीरे बोलने लग जाऊं या अपना speed slow कर लूं, that is an effective use of style that makes the judge focus on that point more. If I say too loudly or too aggressively, that distracts the judge. That gets in the way of me being able to convey my point to the judge. So use style to support your argumentation, not to get in the way of your argumentation. That's how I would go about style. Okay? And different people have different styles. Different. Some people speak in a raised voice. Some people speak slowly. Some people use a very mechanistic way of debating. Some people use a very poetic way of debating and like with very like relatively more rhetoric and things like that. No style is objectively right or wrong. Basically depends on your personality. You are an individual person. You speak in a particular way. That's fine. As long as you're making sense, any style is fine. ठीक है. Do we get a brief context about the question or are we free to interpret it ourselves? By question, Obaid, do you mean the motion? Just clarifying. Okay, for the motion, it can be both. Some motions are self-explanatory. For example, the two motions I showed you in the initial slides, those are pretty self-explanatory. उनमें समझने में कोई दिक्कत नहीं हुई होगी, I'm assuming. हुई हो तो बता देना, चुप मत बैठना. But I'm assuming नहीं हुई होगी, ठीक है? There are motions which talk about concepts which the average person might not know about. So for a functional debate to happen, the people who set the motions, they give you 4 to 5 lines of context about the definition of this concept, that this is what this concept means. Now I'm giving you the motion, debate this concept. That's when you get a brief or a context about the motion. So there are motions that have context also. For the reasons of simplicity, we're not telling you them right now. We'll expose you to them as and when you do mocks and in further workshops and things like that. Also भाई वीडियोस बंद हो गई हैं काफी. गुरमीत was last person standing, वो भी बंद हो गया. बट खैर, अच्छा गुरमीत ने ऑन कर लिया. वाह, देख लो, नॉट अ कंपल्शन, आई एम नॉट फोर्सिंग. बंद करना है तो कर लो, बट भाई अच्छा लगता है, मतलब खुल जाए तो भरोसा रहता है कि हाँ मैं बोर नहीं कर रहा हूँ तुमको, है ना. ओके, सो आई गेस चैट के क्वेश्चंस आर डन. या, मूविंग ऑन. Points of information. This is where the interjection wala question is gonna get addressed. ठीक है. So school की inter-house debates or things like that were somewhat boring because it was just people speaking one after the other alternate में and like lambi speeches and things like that. Or relatively more boring than parliamentary debating. Parliamentary debating का ये aspect makes it a bit more fun, a bit more adrenaline rush wala also, because it's not just speeches that you're giving. You can also ask speakers questions in the middle of the debate. So for example, if uh, एक second, if Kritika is giving a speech and I am in an opposition, I am in the opposite side, I can raise my hand and Kritika can choose to accept or reject my point of information. Point of information is basically what the question or whatever interjection you make in the middle of a person's speech. Whatever you ask is called a point of information. I can raise my hand or I can say POI. Kritika can either accept the POI or reject the POI. Normally, it's recommended that every speaker accepts at least one POI because they exist for a reason, so that on the spot engagement can happen and things like that. It's generally a good tool for engagement, and it's better that you accept POIs. So every speaker is advised to take at least one POI in their speech. Don't be afraid of taking POIs. Even if you fuck up in your first mock or second mock or so, you'll get better at that. None of us were perfect on our first mocks. We've learned with time. So POI or point of information is basically an interjection between a speaker's speech from the other team. It's a good tool for engagement. It can be a question ki, okay, what do you think about this possible implication of your policy or things like that? What are your views on this? This can be a question, or like, uh, you haven't engaged with our argument that of like XYZ issue. What are you, please engage with that or things like that. Questions can be of this form. Clarification is not necessarily part of the arguments or rebuttals or things like that. Clarifications are mostly related to the setup of the debate. So for example, if someone is defining the key terms in the debate or giving a model as to how their policy would pan out. If you have doubts on that, that's when it becomes a clarification. Okay, how are you gonna have the policy? So if the motion is this house would ban drugs, and person doesn't specify in their speech, or PM doesn't specify whether they will ban the sale of drugs or production of drugs, you can ask that in a POI as a clarification. Okay, what does this ban look like? Is this ban on the sale of drugs or the production of drugs or on the purchasing of drugs? Kya hai ye? That becomes a clarification or a direct refutation. As a POI, you can raise your hand. The person accepts your POI. You can say, listen, you said this. We think that due to XYZ reason, this argument doesn't make sense. Please engage. That's a direct refutation. These are the different forms a POI can take. So a POI can only be asked in the first 6 speeches. So speeches ये हैं. From Prime Minister to Op Whip, this set of 6 speeches is called constructive speeches, because this is where you argue and you make arguments and you rebut each other's arguments. These are called constructive speeches, or the constructive half of the debate. And beyond that is the reply, where you're not allowed to bring new arguments or new rebuttals. You're just supposed to tell, okay, given what has happened till OpWeb, why does our team win over this other team, and things like that. So till OpWeb, you're allowed to ask POIs. Uh, POIs can only be asked in the like between the first and the 6th minute. इसका reason ये है that assume yourself to be a speaker giving a speech, ठीक है? In the first minute, most likely you're introducing or you're setting up your speech and you're already starting. तुमने अभी तक कुछ substantial बोला नहीं होगा, ठीक है? तुम start ही कर रहे होगे. So at the start of the speech, it doesn't make sense for someone else to interrupt you जब तुमने कुछ बोला ही नहीं है and things like that, ठीक है? So this is why first minute is blocked for POIs. You can't ask POIs for first minute. Why can't you ask POIs in the last minute? The reason is that in the last minute, the speaker is most likely summarizing their speech and telling what all they have said and why is it important and things like that. They're summing up their speech. उसमें भी अगर आप interrupt कर दो, then that disturbs the flow of the speaker's speech. So especially at the end, that's not something that's ideal. Which is why the time to ask POIs is between the when the first minute is over. So 1 minute 1 second पे आप POI पूछ सकते हो, and the last is 5 minute 59 second. जैसे the timer hits 6, you can't ask POIs. 7:15 पे उसका speech खत्म हो जाएगा, ठीक है? So this is the time that you're allowed to ask POIs. The third Fourth thing is POS should be concise. POS should not go longer than 15 seconds. Uh, Try to keep your POIs in like the shortest form possible because स्पीकर के पास 7 मिनट है, तुम्हारी टीम के पास भी इक्वल अमाउंट ऑफ टाइम है. युवराज, it is advised to at least take one minimum. Ideally, if you take two POIs, that's also great. Beyond two gets a little too much because then it's eating up your space to make argumentation instead of like answering POIs and things like that. So 1 to 2 POIs is a healthy number, one minimum. It's not that you'll ऐसा भी नहीं है कि तुम POIs reject करना allowed नहीं है. You can of course reject a POI. You can have a speech which has 0 POIs, but that is not looked looked as good by the judges because you're essentially blocking engagement from the other team, right? So in your speaker scores you might get somewhat penalized for not taking any POI, but it's your personal judgment. Sometimes the argument that you want to make is so much more important that any POI that can happen from other side is not that important. You need to absolutely make this particular argument in your speech, otherwise तुम हार जाओगे. At that point, fair, don't accept a POI. जो भी होता है कोई बात नहीं. But ideally, in most cases, it's advised that even with the argumentation or rebuttals that you have, you chop out time in your speech for POIs, you account for it, and you manage your time in the speech, right? You make arguments, you make rebuttals, you do weighing, but you also accept POIs. That's ideally how it should happen. So one POI is ideal. Cool. Uh, no, speaker's time is not stopped during questioning. The timer goes on to continue, which is why the fourth point, POIs should be concise and no longer than 15 seconds. Because अगर आप POI पूछ रहे हो दूसरे speaker का, the time that goes on in you asking the POI and them answering the POI is, or at least you asking the POI, is time that they could not use to further their own case. ठीक है? At that point, you're eating away their time. In the principle of fairness, you are supposed to keep your POIs less than 15 seconds or at max 15 seconds. Because आपको भी अगर उस गव टीम को 7-7-7-4 मिनट मिले हैं, आपको भी 7-7-7-4 मिनट मिले हैं. अगर आपके पास इतना लंबा कुछ है जो 30 सेकंड या 1 मिनट जा रहा है, speak it in your speech. Don't make that a POI. For POIs, keep it maximum 15 seconds, ideally under that. Uh, if you go longer than 15 seconds, the speaker has the right to cut you off and say कि by please चुप हो जाओ, like now you've taken enough of my time, now I'll continue with my speech, like answer your POI. or like sometimes it happens that आप 20-25 सेकंड का POI सोचते हो, 15 सेकंड तक you're just setting up your question, actual question end में आता है कि ये बोला, now what are your opinions on this. अगर आप लंबा POI रखोगे तुम्हारा क्वेश्चन ही नहीं आ पाएगा, देन स्पीकर का भी टाइम वेस्ट हुआ, तुम्हारा भी POI वेस्ट हुआ, कोई इंसान क्वेश्चन नहीं समझ पाया रूम में, एंड द स्पीकर गोज ऑन कंटिन्यूइंग देयर स्पीच as if there was no POI to begin with. Not ideal situations, which is why keep your POIs less than 15 seconds. Fifth, POIs must be raised respectfully. This is extremely important. Like I said before, we don't want debaters to create discomfort to other debaters. It's not healthy. So ideally, like for POIs, if I say POI and the speaker rejects me and says कि I'll take you later or abhi nahi or something like that. Ideally, so according to rules or according to most policies, you're supposed to wait at least 15 seconds before you can again attempt to raise your hand or ask POI. Because अगर एक बार रिजेक्ट किया, मेरे को बिठा दिया, मैं 5 सेकंड बाद वापस हाथ खड़ा करूँ, वो मुझे वापस बिठाना पड़ेगा. At that point, I'm being disturbing to the speaker. I'm breaking their flow to a large extent, and it's very unfair, right? So minimum 15 seconds, but minimum limit से मत जाना. Ideally, it should be 30 seconds to 1 minute. I prefer 1 minute because if someone is stopping me, it's probably likely that they want to make an important point in their speech that would take some substantial amount of time for them to make, and uske baad they will have time to answer my POI. So ideally, it's good that you wait a minute or something to ask POI if you've been rejected once. Don't badger the other person, don't continuously raise hands or ask POIs. That distracts the people and even makes them stressed or nervous and things like that. you assuming like you are giving a speech and someone else doing that to you, you would not want to do that, right? So treat others the way you would want to be treated in the debate. Must be raised respectfully. Uh, if you do ask a POI, don't make it a 15 seconds diss or a remark that like uh, bezats the other speaker or things like that. Don't keep it that. Your POI should also be logical and concerned with the arguments of the debate and not to bring down the speaker or tell them that they're stupid or things like that. Mm, Raise POIs respectfully and not in an aggressive manner. Cool. I hope POIs are clear. Case construction. Okay. Um, Case construction. So this is basically where we talk about what you're supposed to do in those debates, how you're supposed to make arguments, and think about like uh, what kind of speeches or what kind of ideas would make me win debates and what would lose me debates. So how you go about it is you read the motion, you understand what the motion demands from both sides. When someone makes a motion, they want government side to defend a particular stance, they want opposition side to defend a different particular stance of an issue. Am I audible? Just confirming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But
अच्छा
Yes.
ठीक है मेरे स्क्रीन पे 3 लोग एक साथ लैग हो गए सो आई वाज लाइक मेरा नेट बीटी दे रहा है क्या बट ओके so you're supposed to demand you're supposed to understand what this motion demands both sides to argue, what stances it asks you to defend, and what the trade-off is. So what is a trade-off? Can anyone unmute and tell me what is a trade-off without googling? गूगल तो मैं भी कर लूंगा. चलो कोई नहीं. So a trade-off is basically you getting something but you also have to give up something else. You can't have both, right? So in a debate there are going to be some benefits that gov side will have. Somewhat khush, it somewhat can be termed as a compromise, but in debating terms, what you mean is that's true. I gave up studies for debating, but okay. Cool. uh, Trade-off basically means कि मैं छोले भटूरे खा सकता हूँ या फिर मैं डोसा खा सकता हूँ, बट मेरे पेट में लिमिटेड जगह है, मैं दोनों नहीं खा सकता. So if I have to eat chole, Gurmeet seems sad. If I have to eat chole bhature, I can't eat dosa. यार I might be cancelled for this यथार्थ, but I haven't watched Avengers का कोई भी movie or like Marvel का कोई भी movie. So I'm really sorry मैं वो question answer नहीं कर पाऊंगा. But I'll watch Marvel once I get the time. बहुत busy चल रहा हूँ. बट खैर सो दिस इज बेसिकली व्हाट अ ट्रेड ऑफ मीन्स. अगर मुझे एक चीज चाहिए तो आई नेसेसरीली हैव टू गिव द अदर थिंग अप. आई कांट हैव बोथ. ठीक है. This is basically what happens in a debate also. In a debate, because I already told you both sides are equally contestable. You can't say that gov is right, op is wrong, या gov पे सारे benefits हैं, op पे कोई benefit नहीं है, or things like that. Because this motion exists and this debate exists and both sides do have some benefits or some harms, there are benefits that gov will have as a result of favoring the motion that op cannot have. Op will have some other benefits which gov cannot have. Okay? So this is basically the trade-off or the principle that you're supporting. If you, for example, um, let's take, अच्छा ठीक है, ट्रेड ऑफ हम एग्जांपल के साथ समझेंगे बाद में, बट फॉर नाउ मूविंग अहेड विद द थ्योरी एंड टेक्निकलिटीज एंड एवरीथिंग. So your arguments are supposed to be based on logic. Logic and like arguments in general are basically reasons or logical reasons why you should support or oppose a motion. Facts don't win you debates. They're useful to prove a logical argument. So you can make a logical argument that listen, this will lead to this will lead to this, and then you can show a real life example of something happened in some country. This was the exact same situation. So this is a real life example. That's a fact helping an argument. ठीक है, बट अगर आप फैक्ट अलोन बोल के आ जाओगे, कोई जज आपको डिबेट नहीं देगा. दिल से भाई आपने भाई नहीं सॉरी, दिल से दैट बडी यू डिडंट एक्सप्लेन the argument, so this fact in and of itself is not relevant, not useful. I don't know what to make of it, so I could not give you the debate. Sorry, not sorry. ठीक है. So you have to give logical reasons to support or oppose a motion. So there are principles, there are impacts, and there are different kinds of arguments. This is also something that we'll do later on in further workshops. But in simple words, principle is basically a value that you want to uphold in society. ठीक है. For example, right to privacy. Right to privacy is a principle. You believe that every person or every individual should have the right to privacy and their right should be protected at all costs. This is a principle. So right to privacy becomes a principle. Or equal opportunity. Equal opportunity says that everyone should be given equal opportunity. You should not bar the entry into fields like education or politics and things like that to certain people based on their gender or race or caste and things like that. It should be open to all and things like that. That's the principle of equal opportunity. You want to uphold the value of equal opportunity or the value of the right to privacy in society. That's basically a principle. In most debates, there are impacts, as in consequences, but there are also principles. So you have to understand what the trade-off is. Some impact basically means principle chodo, but like, and this is a simpler explanation. There is a very nuance to this. There's an idea that impact is also somewhat based on principle and things like that. वो सब हम बाद में discuss करेंगे. But for now, for simplicity, let's differentiate principles and impacts. Impacts basically mean कि अगर मैं ये policy pass करूँगा तो it will have this effect on the this particular party. For example, if the motion is एक सेकंड मोशन चैट में लिखता हूँ. This house would uh, okay, एक्चुअली नहीं, रुको, इसका एक मॉडिफाइड वर्जन बनाते हैं. Okay, so this is a motion. This house believes that developing countries should, sorry, mistake. Developing countries should ease labor regulations in times of economic crisis. ठीक है. So if you have any idea as to what goes on in an economic crisis, this is helpful. But if you don't, like, just logically think what happens in an economic crisis, the economy is down, which means that businesses are not functioning at their full capacity. They are reducing their production, they're firing employees, layoffs हो रहे हैं and things like that. ठीक है. This is the characterization of an economic crisis. So in that situation of an economic crisis, the motion says that developing countries should ease labor regulations. What does ease labor regulation mean? Easing labor regulations means that easing things like minimum wages. So companies might not be favoring to employ people because a minimum wage is like 20,000 rupees or something. If government eases that minimum wage from 20,000 to 15,000 or 10,000, it's more likely that in that time of economic crisis, companies would still employ more people than they would usually. कि भाई अच्छा 20,000 पे हम तुम्हें employ करना afford नहीं कर सकते, but 15,000 पे कर सकते हैं, or things like that. This is basically the interpretation of the motion. ठीक है. So whether this should be done by developing countries or not, this is the debate. अब the trade-off here is that on government, the principle or like the general idea can be कि यार देखो, uh, people are people usually get fired or layoffs happen in economic crisis. uh, the working class people are the most hit by this because production कम होता है, तो these are the people that first get fired or they're the first in line when getting fired and things like that. So in an effort to achieve the impact of sustaining their livelihood, this is an impact argument कि एम्प्लॉयज के पास या पब्लिक के पास लाइवलीहुड का एक तरीका रहे और a source of livelihood रहे, इसलिए we think developing countries should ease labor regulations so that companies fire less people, more people still have jobs, and they still are able to sustain themselves through this economic crisis. This is an impact. This is something that Gov exclusively has, or like because of easing labor regulations, Gov gets this benefit exclusively. Op can't claim this benefit because this comes specifically from reducing your labor regulations. Op पे labor regulations still strict हैं, so जो increase in employment labor regulations कम होने से आया, op cannot claim that benefit. This is what I mean by a trade-off. But op would have some other benefit. Op can say कि भाई नहीं, I'm so sorry. Op can say that listen, no matter what the economic situation is, it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that the workers of the country are not exploited by companies, no matter what the situation is. This gives leeway to companies to like have harsher working environments and pay low salaries. मतलब this is basically what the government is sanctioning कि ठीक है, दे दो low salaries, कर दो working conditions कम, but employed रखो. As government, it's your responsibility to ensure that this does not happen to the workers of your country, no matter what the situation is. So ठीक है, लोग फायर होंगे, but at least जो लोग होंगे jobs में, they won't have bad working conditions, or they won't be treated below par, and they would still have a standard level of livelihood as opposed to just any kind of livelihood. ठीक है, this is the part of the trade-off that op exclusively has. Gov can't claim this benefit because Gov खुद कह रहे हैं कि we are going to reduce labor regulations, which means employment environments, like job environments, are going to get worse off in Gov. That's a fact. That's like you have to agree to that. So Gov cannot claim that benefit. Op can only claim that benefit. Now, I'm not giving these arguments, these are not ideal or best arguments for these motions. These are just normal arguments to explain to you the concept of trade-off and why some benefits only belong to some sides as a result of the motion, for you to understand this. ठीक है? So the debate is then about you proving your own benefits, you proving that कुछ हार्म, अगर दूसरी साइड आपको किसी हार्म पे अक्यूज करिए कि यार इनके साइड में तो ये गलत चीज होगी, इट्स अबाउट यू टेलिंग दैट भाई तुम्हारे साइड पे भी ये गलत चीज होगी, है ना, थिंग्स लाइक दैट, ड्यू टू एक्स वाई जेड रीजन गलत चीज होगी एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. सो ट्रेड ऑफ इज बेसिकली this, that Gov has a certain benefit of ensuring employment to a larger number of people. This is something that at least at this level of argumentation, op cannot have this benefit. So op has to trade off, like Gov has to trade off quality of employment to gain employment. ठीक है, this is the trade off. Op on the other hand says कि ठीक है, some people will get fired or laid off in our world. We are okay with trading off some employment as long as we ensure the benefit of this, that the people who are employed in a meaningful way, are respected, and like their rights are protected and they are not exploited and things like that. So this is basically a trade-off. So this is how you make logical arguments to support or oppose a motion. ठीक है, अब इसमें अगर मैं facts ले आऊँ as gov कि यार मैं सिर्फ ये बोलूँ कि इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस में अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट रेट फॉर एग्जांपल 20-30% हो जाता है, इसलिए हमको लेबर रेगुलेशंस वो कर देनी चाहिए, रिलैक्स. बट ठीक है, टू सम एक्सटेंट इट डज मेक सेंस, बट लाइक what does easing labor regulations do? You still have to explain the mechanism as to why easing those regulations is likely to incentivize these companies to not fire workers or still keep some employees intact and things like that, and what are the benefits of this to these employees, which is basically your impact and things like that. So you can obviously use facts in support of arguments, but you need to make arguments. You need to have a logical flow of your arguments, that A will lead to B, B will lead to C, C is good for XYZ parties and things like that. ठीक है? So this is how you make arguments. Consistency, last thing. Consistency is important in a debate because you have to be what do I mean by consistency? I have 3 speakers inside government. I am the DPM. Suppose Vrinda is whip, Sahaj is PM. ठीक है? If Sahaj says something in PM, I can't say something that contradicts the same thing in DPM. ठीक है? Otherwise, my case is contradicting. PM कुछ एक चीज बोल रहा है, DPM उसके opposite चीज बोल रहा है. Judge will ask, who do I believe? I am getting confused. तुम्हारा case fuck all है, भागो. ठीक है? So, you need to be consistent. You need to have one united case as a team. So like, don't don't hoard arguments in your mind कि अच्छा ये PM चला जाएगा, बकवास आर्ग्यूमेंट बोल के आ जाएगा, मैं DPM में अच्छी आर्ग्यूमेंट बोल दूंगा so that मेरे स्पीकर स्कोर्स बढ़ जाए. You don't have to do that. You function as a team in a debate. You have a united case. You are consistent throughout all your speeches. Consistency, by the way, doesn't mean that you'll say the same thing in all three speeches. Don't think of consistency as you cannot say something different in DPM than you said in PM, or Gavip can't do anything different than DPM did, because वो होगा फिर तो तीनों speeches same ही हो जाएंगे. What you still can do is provide rebuttals to दूसरी side, provide further analysis as to why what your previous speaker said is true, or defend your arguments against attacks that the other side fronted against your arguments. These things are still different than the initial arguments that your PM made, but these things are still consistent. These things are still acceptable for you as a DPM or for you as a GovWhip to do, because they're in line with your case. Inconsistent क्या होगा? अगर मैं कुछ ऐसा आर्ग्यूमेंट बना दूं आगे जो कि PM के कैरेक्टराइजेशन को या PM ने जो कुछ भी बोला उसमें से किसी चीज को कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट करता है, that would be inconsistency. So you have to be consistent and you have to be on the same page as your teammates at all points in time in debates. इसके बाद बस वर्कशॉप खत्म होने वाली है. I'll just have one slide more, but before that, does anyone have any questions? Himani, Gurmeet, thank you for keeping cameras on. Big motivation. I'll wait 30 seconds if anyone has any questions. You can type in chat, you can unmute. Otherwise, I'll go to the last slide. हाँ जी गौरव बोलिए.
Yes, actually, I have a question related to that the 7 minutes duration. How do we get to know that we are close to 7 minutes or we are about to get to that? How
Okay,
do
good.
the person get to know that?
Yeah. Good question. So, sorry, this wasn't covered in my slides. How you get to know is, so in every debate room, there are persons from the organizing college ka organizing committee. They are there in every debate room. They will tap the table when 1 minute gets over. They will tap the table when 6 minutes gets over. They will tap the table twice when 7 minutes get over. And 7:15 पे वो tap करते ही रहेंगे to signal that भाई जाओ अब हो गया आपका. So that's one way that you will be made aware of the time no matter what. And in addition to that, you can also have a stopwatch in your phone and you can keep that when you deliver your speech. Usually that's what happens in speeches. You can carry your phone in your hand, keep that on the table or on a podium depending on where you're debating. Start the stopwatch so you can तुम्हारी नजर रहेगी टाइम पे. So rest assured that you will know how long it has passed and things like that. बस आपको कॉन्शियस रहना है टाइम का. Any other questions? Cool, I'm guessing और questions नहीं है. I'll just move to the last slide then. How do debate tournaments function? I think ये भी काफी लोगों के मन में सवाल होगा कि we are doing debates, but okay, how do we win? How do we lose? What determines things? And what achievements look like? And how does a tournament function basically? How does an event in the debating sphere function? So debate tournaments usually last 3 days. Not a norm, like it is a norm, but there can be tournaments that last 2 days, or there can be tournaments that last 1 day. There can be tournaments that last more than 3 days as well. But the usual tournament that you will go to as a debater, like at least in the DU circuit or anywhere, usually lasts 3 days. The first 2 days are preliminary rounds. Gautam, do you have a question?
Yeah, can you just repeat what you said? Actually, your voice wasn't clear earlier.
Acha. Just to confirm, was it unclear to others as well? Acha, ठीक है.
No, it was clear.
No, it was clear.
Maybe
Okay,
it's
I'll
more.
repeat. Yeah, no problem. I'll repeat. So, debate tournaments usually function 3 days. The reason why I've written usually is because there are tournaments that function 5 days or 7 days. There are also tournaments that function 2 days or for one day. But the usual tournament functions 3 days. Okay? At least in the DU circuit. So circuit is basically the word we use to represent the entire debating community. The debating circuit means the debating community. DU circuit means DU debating community and things like that. You will also hear such things in other cultural societies. For example, if someone is an audiophile, uh, there this word is used like DU ka music circuit and things like that. So for every activity this word can be used. You will get used to the jargon and all. Cool. So usually the tournaments last 3 days. There are preliminary rounds that happen on the first 2 days, and then on the third day there are knockout rounds or elimination rounds. So it's somewhat like a FIFA World Cup. I don't watch FIFA itna. I've very recently started. Abhi, the final that happened was the first football match that I ever watched, and it was really good. And उसके बाद I watched कल रात का match, which was Man City versus क्या था लिवरपूल. मेरे दोस्तों ने हु इज द गुड मेसी यार. मतलब आई एम नॉट अ fan of anyone, so I'm still up for grabs as a fan. But that match, वैसे Mbappe also did good. But खैर, uh, sorry for football jargon. I'm also new to that. I don't know football. But if you people are into football, then the way a FIFA World Cup operates, how some teams qualify for elimination rounds and some teams are left not qualified, that's exactly how debate works. मेरा उल्टा था. I didn't know football. I got into debating first. That's how I understood, Asha, this is how FIFA works. Unconventional, but okay. So, what happens is it's not that you debate against some other college ka team, and if you lose a debate your debating career is over or you're out of the tournament. ऐसा नहीं है, ठीक है. You're given ample amount of chances, at least in most tournaments. There are also knockout tournaments जहाँ पे आप एक मैच हारे तो आप बाहर, but those don't happen very often. साल में एक आध होती है. The usual tournament gives you sufficient number of rounds to debate. So one debate usually lasts 2 hours, like taking into account the debate, the prep time before that, and the time for judges ka justification after that. All of it takes around 2 hours for one debate. Okay. So you get, as a team or as a judge, 5 rounds to perform, no matter how good or how bad your performance is. Okay. You'll get that opportunity at like at least till the first 5 rounds. Everyone debates, everyone judges. Okay. After 5 rounds, what happens is, in these 5 rounds, some teams might have won all the 5 debates, some teams might have won 4 debates and lost one debate, and things like that. 3 wins, 2 losses, and ऐसे कर करके. Teams might also have received speaker scores, individual speaker scores. किसी के स्पीकर स्कोर्स का टोटल बहुत ज़्यादा होगा, किसी के स्पीकर स्कोर्स का टोटल बहुत कम होगा, या किसी का ठीक ठाक होगा. So according to wins and speaker scores, teams are ranked. ठीक है. So teams are ranked, and then the top few teams break. So break in debating terms means advance to out rounds. If I say that, oh, Sahaj, Vrinda and I broke at a tournament, it means that we advanced to the out rounds or the elimination rounds of a tournament. So for example, if there's a tournament which has 40 teams, okay, and they decide that we'll have break to quarterfinals. Quarterfinals means 4 matches happening in it in the first elimination rounds. 4 matches means 8 teams. This essentially means that out of the 40 teams, after 5 rounds are over, 8 teams will break to quarters. So 8 teams qualify, rest 32 teams don't qualify. Okay? So these 8 teams then get to debate in the quarterfinals. क्वार्टर्स में 4 टीम्स जीतेंगी, 4 टीम्स हारेंगी. जो जीतेंगी वो सेमीज जाएंगी. सेमीफाइनल में 2 टीम्स जीतेंगी, 2 टीम्स हारेंगी. जो 2 टीम्स सेमीफाइनल जीतेंगी, दे विल डिबेट अगेंस्ट ईच अदर इन द ग्रैंड फाइनल ऑफ द डिबेट टूर्नामेंट. This is usually how a usual debate tournament functions. So don't be scared of losing debates, and also, uh, as a corollary to that, don't feel that you have achieved the world if you win a debate. There's You have to have consistent performance in the 5 rounds. I'm not saying पांचों के पांचों जीतने जरूरी हैं. Most team, like there's only like a couple of teams that are able to win all 5 tournaments. Most other teams have at least one losses in a tournament, at least one loss. So no pressure, but still like you have sufficient opportunity. Your performance overall in these 5 rounds will determine whether you qualify in a tournament to the elimination rounds or not. So just for uh, lingo's sake, the preliminary rounds जो शुरू के 5 है, we call them in rounds, and the elimination rounds we call them out rounds. ये जो बीच में हाइफन है ये ना लगाओ तो भी चलेगा, चैट में कैसे भी लिख दो कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, बट आगे से you'll hear these things a lot कि अच्छा थर्ड राउंड चल रहा है या थर्ड इन राउंड चल रहा है, और लाइक कितने आउट राउंड्स हैं इस टूर्नामेंट में, और लाइक things like that. ठीक है, so this is how the tournament functions. Similar to teams, judges also function. So judges are also competitively judging at the tournament. What does that mean? पहले मैंने आपको बताया था judges have to justify their verdict to the teams. What happens is judges are giving win or loss to teams in debate rooms. Judges are giving speaker scores to speakers in debate rooms. But after they justify their verdict, the teams also give scores to judges based on the justification that they give. Yep, that is interesting. You might have not seen that, because usually matlab it's very arbitrary and the judge can like decide whatever they want and the judge is some highly reputed person. Here we have Aam Janta judging people, but the benefit is that they also have accountability. They also have to justify their verdict to get good scores from you so that you are satisfied. Uh, you as debaters will also give scores to judges out of 10. Uh, if you're satisfied, also the justification doesn't have to be legendary or बहुत बढ़िया सा justification. If it has to be satisfactory. If a judge gives you a satisfactory justification, even though you're feeling mad or you're pissed off that you lost the round, you have to listen to the judge still from their perspective कि ठीक है आपने ये argument बोला, उन्होंने ये argument बोला, for ABC reasons their argument was more persuasive than yours, or their rebuttals beat your argument, and this is why I gave the debate to them. At that point, don't be mad just because you lost the debate. uh, think whether think from a neutral perspective about the judge ka justification. If you think that is a satisfactory or a reasonable justification for making you lose, give them good marks. Don't penalize them just because they made you lose. If you still don't think that they were logical or they judged unfairly, if you think that, then sure, reduce their marks by 1 2 3 4 जितने marks करने हैं reduce. You can give them a 5, you can give them a 6. बहुत ज़्यादा लो भी नहीं देना है. 1 or 2 or 3 is not acceptable as a score, and it invites attention from the Orcom. They may ask you कि why are you giving itna low score, justify why you're given this low score, or they might just drop that score thinking कि तुमने तो हार के गुस्से में इनको इन लो स्कोर दिया है, हम इसको नहीं मान रहे, हम इस स्कोर को ही हटा रहे. So you have to be mindful of all these things. But yes, there is accountability on judges as well. You will score judges. Even if you win, मतलब जीतोगे तो I'm guessing खुश ही होगे, so you'll score the judges well. But still हाँ मतलब still look at the justification and mark accordingly. So this is how tournament functions. At the end of 5 rounds, judges also have received scores from multiple teams. उन सारे scores का average लिया जाता है. Then the judges are ranked from top to bottom की top judges ये हैं. So if a tournament has like 50 judges or 40 judges for example, there is a break to quarters, and this means 4 rooms in the first elimination round. This means that the tournament needs, if the tournament says कि यार मेरे को हर क्वार्टर फाइनल में 3 जजेस का पैनल रखना है, then the tournament needs to break at least 12 judges. ठीक है. What happens is they select the top 12 judges after 5 rounds have happened. जिन 12 judges का average सबसे ज़्यादा है, 12 या 15 जो भी हो, they break those judges as well. So judges also break at tournaments. So some top teams break, some top judges break. That's how tournaments function. And with respect to like tournaments in general and your experiences at tournaments, you're gonna have a wide spectrum of experiences. You'll win a lot of debates, you'll lose a lot of debates. Whatever happens, don't lose hope. And it's a sport, just like any other sport. You're not always supposed to win. There will be times you will lose. But the wins are worth it. Even the losses are. Even the losses make you learn, or like make you improve yourself so that you don't lose like that again in the future or things like that. So just keep working on yourself constantly on your debating skills and things like that. Don't lose hope. If you lose, don't be too proud. If you win, I'm not saying emotion khatam kar do, just be stoic and like don't feel anything. I'm not saying that. It's fair for you to feel disheartened at a loss. It's fair for you to feel happy if you win something. But yeah, that's basically the nature of this activity. It's a dynamic one. The same team you defeated last week at a tournament might defeat you at a different tournament. Vice versa can also happen. Totally depends on the particular debate that happens. Okay? So this is basically it from my side. In case you have any questions, or in case Sahaj, Vrinda, Dhruv, anything you want to add?
Nothing from my end, Akshat. I think you've covered everything.
Okay.
हाँ तो मतलब एक ही चीज ऐड करनी है इसमें कि मतलब डोंट थिंक ऑफ दी सेशंस एज कि लाइक कुछ मतलब बस पीपीटी चल रही है बस हो रहा है अभी हमारे ऑल ऑफ आवर एग्जाम्स आर गोइंग ऑन तो इसलिए मतलब वी आरंट एबल टू इन्वॉल्व आवरसेल्व्स दैट मच क्योंकि लाइक लगातार लाइन में एग्जाम्स हैं और लाइक मतलब हो रहा है प्रॉब्लम थोड़ा तो आफ्टर ऑल आवर एग्जाम्स आर डन वी विल बी कंडक्टिंग मॉक्स और उसमें मतलब काफी मजा आने वाला है व्हेन वी वुड बी कंडक्टिंग ऑफलाइन मॉक्स एंड ऑल एंड यू वुड एक्चुअली बी मेकिंग आर्गुमेंट्स and you would actually find your style of debating because सबका style is different मतलब we would tell you what you need to do but how you do it it's up to you what you want to do so it's always separate for everyone it is subjective you will make your own style you will make your own style of rebutting their points of coming up with new ideas so everything is like very very new and very very adventurous so it will be a lot of fun and when we would be conducting mocks like offline we would be debating we would be rebutting so all of this is going to be very very fun our exams are going to end at 31st उसके बाद we would be starting with mocks pretty soon and काफी मजा करेंगे उसके बाद
Yeah, exactly. And before all of you debate, you're going to see us debating as well. So, one of the first activities would be us showing you what an actual debate looks like. And you can go ahead and you'll notice that how even all of us who have been debating together for over a year now, we debate like really differently. Even our styles for every single speech are very different. So, like, you'll go ahead and see what aggression or what calmness and all of those doubts, they'll be cleared very soon.
Yeah, you see clear contrasts of everybody's
Yeah,
style of debating.
exactly.
अच्छा रिकॉर्डिंग बंद कर दूं फिर आगे ही बात करते हैं
Yeah,
हाँ
yeah.
जी अक्षत कर दो
ओके